Howdy folks, and welcome to Explaining Gun Control Part 4, Muskets. Now, I'm a little annoyed that I actually have to bring this up, just because I think it's such a silly argument, and to the credit of the mainstream media, I don't actually see them use this argument too much. But where I do see it quite a bit is on social media, and in the comment sections of various articles that do show up. Now, the argument is that since muskets were the only thing around when the Second Amendment was written, that's all it applies to. You should only be able to have muskets. And that's just completely false. So first of all, we have to establish what the Founding Fathers meant when they wrote the Second Amendment. In the Second Amendment, it says militia. There's a phrase in there that says militia. And I'll get into more of what the Second Amendment is all about in another video. But for the purposes I'm trying to make here, the militia was the general populace of the country at the time. And the purpose of the militia was so that the country didn't have a standing army. The populace was the peacekeeping force. It was the army. And as such, the Second Amendment meant that they could have any of the weapons of war that were around at the time. And indeed they could. You could have cannons, you could have artillery, you could have mortars, you could have any gun you wanted. And that's actually true today too. As long as it's muzzle loading, you can have cannons of any size you want. And today, AR-15s are considered by some to be weapons of war. And while they aren't used by the military, M16s and M4s are related to them, and I would still put them in the same general category of small arms. And in the context of the militia, the Second Amendment would apply to that. Another point people like to make is that the Founding Fathers couldn't have envisioned the types of firearms we have nowadays. And while that's true, they could have foreseen that they would be different from what they had in their time. What I mean by that is that the Founding Fathers would have been aware of the evolution of arms up to that point. They would have known about the evolution from a rock to a spear, and from a spear to a bow. They would know that the bow would be more efficient than the spear, and they would know that the gun was more efficient than the bow. And they would have been able to surmise that firearms would be getting more efficient as time went on. And that's what we see today. That's why we have the guns we do. That's why we keep innovating. That's why they keep getting better. But even the time the Founding Fathers were around, they still knew about some of these innovations. They saw that progression move forward. There were things like flintlocks that had multiple charges stacked in them, so you could fire one charge after another. There were compressed air rifles that could fire multiple shots before they were spent and needed to be recharged. And there were primitive Gatling guns that were patented. They weren't efficient and they were crude, but the Founding Fathers would have bore witness to these innovations. So to summarize here, the AR-15 today fills the same role as the musket did when the Second Amendment was written, and when that Second Amendment was written, the Founding Fathers would have known enough about firearms technology and the direction it was headed in order to account for that when they wrote that amendment. Anyway, that's all I have for today, and I will see you next time. Ciao.